Well, hello, my name is Dr. Jessica Stone, and today I want to share with you a little bit about the passion that I have for helping the younger generation to be strong in mind. I've been a professional counselor for 26 years, and so I've seen several generations come and grow up in and through my practice. And something very interesting seems to be unfolding is the more information we seem to have, the more access we have to mental health services, counseling services, insights into the human mind, the more unhealthy people are becoming. Have you noticed that too? So, my goal is to provide seminars and equipping services, support systems for those younger generations to come back to a place of having a strong mind no matter their circumstances. Because just as this video was labeled Generation Z, especially because they're in the prime of their life, this is 16 to late 20s, that they are in a storm. They've been born into a storm of the internet, of social media, and they don't quite know how to use that. They have all of this insight, but they don't actually have the capability to apply it to their life to live in a healthy way. Some people might say, well, it's just because our world is so crazy today. But I think those of us who are from younger generations could say we had our hardships too. We had difficulties in other ways. We certainly didn't have access to all of the information and the speed of which things are done. We had a lot more physically intensive things that we had to do. Getting information was much more difficult. Even if you needed counseling, that was very scarce. That wasn't something that was readily available. And so it's not really about the information. I think that's what we're learning. That's what we're seeing. That's not what creates a strong mind, strong faith. We have more information, more people, more voices, more people speaking than ever before. And yet I don't see that translating into people being stronger, healthier. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. So I'd like to share with you just a couple minutes of my insights, and perhaps that will ignite something inside of you. If you're a parent or a grandparent watching this, I would love for you to share that with your Gen Zer. Perhaps this is even something that you would do together, but let's take a look. So, really, what I want to do is expose the gap that exists between Gen Z having all of this insight, all of this exposure to information, and yet feeling completely overwhelmed by it. That they have learned how to express themselves, probably better than any generation before them, but they continue to feel fragile in their mental and emotional health, probably more than any generation before them. And that they're connected in a way that, some of the older generations, we couldn't even have imagined to connect with people globally, to have a conversation with someone like this over the internet. That just wasn't a thing 30, 40 years ago. We would have to wait 7 to 10 days for a letter to cross the ocean. So there's this connectedness, and yet people are more alone, feeling more alone than ever before. So let's connect those gaps. What does that mean? Where does that come from? This is not a character issue. I have seen a lot of harshness and even judgmentalism from some of the older generations because this digital age was not how we grew up. Sometimes we forget that this is all that they've ever known. And we can say, well, it's really made them selfish. It's because of, social media. And I think the impact of going through a pandemic, that this has changed them from the inside out, from their very brain wiring, as this picture shows, because of what they were born into. And now, how do we help them? We can't rewire their history or how they've been raised. How do we help them to be strong, to address that which is causing them to struggle? So it's really a mindset framework issue, and not because they are innately selfish or weak. But what my desire is to bring this generation back out of surviving and truly to live a thriving, fulfilling life, exactly what God would want for them. Here are a few highlights of what I see that generation grew up with, what they've been exposed to. It was constant information. Since they were very young, this is what they've always known. The information that they can very quickly find if they don't know something. A lot of times that meant they didn't go to their parents, grandparents, teachers. They were finding it on their own, which for the ease of finding it could be kind of nice, but they were lacking the connection, the relationship with sharing information, that there's something very God designed in how we relate to others. When we go to them, ask for their advice, ask them how to do something, Now we ask Google or ChatGPT, and it's without relationship. There's identity pressure and comparison exposure like nothing any of the older generations were exposed to. Sure, we have movie stars that we thought were maybe something to aspire to, or musicians that we may have liked. We would see them here or there on a commercial on TV, but there was nothing like we see in the social media arena today. This idea that anyone could break out and become famous, right? Or well known, or that they have this extreme influence, and with influence, it must equal purpose, right? And so this younger generation, Gen Z especially, has had pressure from day one. Who are you going to be? How are you going to look? What is your identity? What is your brand? And this is something that they has truly formed how they think, how they interact with the world around them. They are an emotional validation culture. So whether it's social media and they express themselves and get comments and likes, or just in general, what we have kind of swung the pendulum almost too far the other way with counseling and pop psychology, is that all feelings are valid and everyone needs to validate your feelings, no matter how healthy or unhealthy they might be. Things like it's your truth. We as professionals, as professional mental health, trained in that and how the brain works, and the psyche and all of these things that are constantly forming from a young age into adulthood, we can understand how that might be devastating, but most people don't, especially the younger generation. It's just what they have always known. So part of what I teach is that addiction to validation and how it's really created instability rather than what it was intended to do, was to help someone understand that they're not crazy, they're not broken, but we need to address, why do you think the way you do? Why do you feel the way you do? We just don't validate it and then shoo them away, which is what I feel like most of that theory has actually done. And then finally, that they're told to define their own version of a life's meaning. So is that something that's spiritually based? Is it based on what the culture says at the moment? So it's always changing and shifting. We were never meant as human beings to construct our own self-worth, our own identity. It absolutely has led to a crisis in mental and emotional health. And to do that, to ask individuals to do that in and of themselves, to basically self-create, to self-identify, there's no outward anchor. And that's exactly how it feels when they get into times of life's difficulties, pressure, suffering, is there's nothing outside of themselves that they can rely on to be true, to be steadfast, to give them courage. So that's something I believe we really need to restore for the younger generations, is a steadfast belief in who they are. They were created for a reason and a purpose, and that is something they can rely on that's outside of them. So, the way that I help these younger generations reform and reset their minds is first to establish how they're thinking, how they've been raised to perform, to act, to behave, how that hasn't worked for them. And then we can start the restoration and the reformation process. What I have learned from, again, years and years of working with young people, if you don't start with the why isn't this working? You'll get a lot more resistance. Nobody likes to be told that the way that you think isn't working. I would rather help them explore what's not working in your life. Where did that initially come from? What teachings? What do you see in your current environment, the family that you grew up in? All of those things matter. So the first one is that in the world that they've lived in, literally the selfie culture, right? That they grew up taking pictures of themselves, of Snapchat, sending pictures of themselves back and forth. It created a self-focus. Every teenager, I think, since the generations began the creation of Earth, it's part of their identity formation that they're a little self-focused. I was too when I was that age. We can tend to think the whole world revolves around us. And a little bit of that is natural formation. We're trying to figure out at that stage in our life, especially between the ages of 14 to 18, who am I? What do I like? What do I want to be? So there is some need for that. Even the detaching from your parents saying, this is who we want you to be. So figuring that out takes a little bit of a need for self-focus. But because that has been exaggerated, because it has been reinforced by the culture, by social media to such an extreme level, it caused this generation, Gen Z and younger, to overanalyze everything because there was this constant stream through social media, through the movies that they watch, even what they're learning in school, is all reinforcing this idea that you better figure out who you are and how people are going to see you. And it's very anxiety ridden. And it's not the only reason, but I do believe it is a major reason so many people in the younger generation suffer from anxiety and would say that they're hardly ever at rest, just a constant agitation and their minds kind of running wild. It's one of the reasons that they will fall into doom scrolling, is because they just need something to focus on other than themselves. And then another area that I have seen to be life changing, honestly, is this idea of exposing comfort seeking. This is not something that has been a problem for many generations. It's fairly recent. The human tendency to self protect and self preserve is God given, but if it's not tempered, if it's not dealt with in the mind and then translated into behaviors, it can become one of the most addictive, leading to addiction, leading to depression, than any other issue in the world today. And what I mean by that is, in generations before the last couple, they would expect bad things to happen, hard things happen, wars happen, the depression. If we go back even further, there was the pioneers that settled our country. They expected people to die from disease. They expected to starve to death. Like, this was something that was part of their life, part of their culture. And today, because of the conveniences, because of modern technology and medical advances, there's almost an assumption that we shouldn't suffer, that bad things shouldn't happen, that we have more control than we actually do. And it has led to this place of fragility, that we cannot handle a single thing out of order. The lights can't be too bright. The noises can't be too loud. Like, I'm hearing this from schools, from shopping malls, it's everywhere in our culture, that we have to create the perfect environment so that people feel comfortable so that they can cope with life. And if not, then they are immediately in these places of anxiety, agitation, depression. We can't stay in this place, people. And I think we see it, that the mental health, the level of diagnoses has escalated. Again, I've been a professional. I've diagnosed people 26 years, but there is a significant shift that has happened, I would say, in the last 10 years for sure. Why is everybody on the spectrum? Why are children incapable of getting through a school day without a mental or emotional breakdown? And those are generalizations. Of course, that's not happening for everyone, but it's severe. It's significant. And so it's an epidemic that I believe needs to be addressed. And we can bring stability, health, peace, healing if we just give them, first of all, the mindset that's good and healthy and from God, and then the tools to walk it out. And then the third major area that I see that's really causing a lot of dysfunction is this idea that we can control our circumstances, our future, our destiny. Again, this was not an assumption that most people in the generations before us, they didn't hold that as a priority. They knew that the world that we live in is always changing, that it's volatile, that they needed to be grateful for every day because you never know what's going to happen. I grew up hearing that from my grandparents, but I don't hear that today. It's about everything has an answer. Everything needs a plan, a goal. There's a million and one strategies out there and how to do that. There's a YouTube video or an Instagram reel to tell you what to do and how to accomplish it. And it sets us up for this false belief that everything has an answer and it's within my control to execute it, so that I know what's going to happen. So I feel prepared. And there's just this constant fear, whether it's known or unknown, conscious or subconscious, that a young person is going through this in their analysis, but it's happening, and it's causing an unheard of level of anxiety, of really paralysis. How many younger people get trapped in this idea of, I don't know what I want to do. I can't find a place for myself in this life. And they're not launching. They're not feeling confident in moving forward in life. So it's been through having hundreds of conversations with Gen Zers that I have come to a few areas of concentration that I believe will bring healing and exponential confidence to this generation in the areas where they've really been attacked, where what would normally have been a foundation, a framework for a healthy mindset has not been established. In fact, I would say it's even been stolen, that they have been told to think and believe and grasp for that which does not build a healthy foundation. So, a few of those areas that I would focus on is how do we help them have emotional strength? This world is not getting any simpler, any less chaotic, probably anytime soon. So, they need to develop a resiliency for difficulty, so that they can be healthy no matter what the circumstance. So it's the opposite approach, that instead of trying to make their environment something that will not cause them stress, we want to equip them to be strong, to be healthy, to be courageous, no matter the circumstance. And then that they have a purpose that's ignited in a divine way, that they can stand firm in that it's not something that changes or that would be reshaped by something they see online or a person that they're trying to emulate, that they have a confidence that they have been made uniquely and that their purpose is something no one else can accomplish. It's so divine, it's so unique. That they would have steadfast hope, that even if things don't work out, that perfect plan, the solution that they tried, that they wouldn't become discouraged. Rather, they could reestablish hope again and again. And then finally, that they would have a healthy level of surrender to God, that there would not be this white knuckle grip on the control that they would try to have in their life, and that they could live in the flow of what is God asking them to do. How do they step in line with that and cooperate, co-author their story with God. And yet, in times when they feel like they don't know what to do, they have that outside anchor. They have that reassurance that no matter who is or isn't in my life, I'm not alone. So here's the road to transformation that I am offering. First, it would be a 3-week course in which the first week we would address identity. This is self versus God and others. What does that mean? How do I step into that? Why is that different than defining myself just in and from what I believe? How do you find freedom from all the pressure that you put on yourself? That whether that was something taught to you or it was a silent message that you picked up through our culture, I would say social media screams this, that you need to figure out who you are and how you're going to be something significant. So how do we help get you out of the pressure of that? Why do we have such a level of self-hatred in our culture today, and hatred for one another? This self-obsession that has been birthed out of focusing and having that over-analysis on self. That's really the same root. And so that needs to be exposed and healed and replaced with something healthier. Then in week 2, we address this idea of strength. How do we bring Gen Zers to this level where you can feel courageous and confident, not agitated and triggered and hopeless? These things have been, again, I believe many of those, what I just described, have been a part of your foundation, that you've been shown a very scary, tumultuous world. You have seen things that, again, generations and generations before you have never seen. Everything from gory movies to wars on social media to literally seeing people shot before you. These are things that cause trauma, that cause internal pain, that if you do not have someone who's helping you reconcile that and grow from that, can be adding to your mental and emotional health, the unhealth that you might be feeling. So how do we come back from that culture and you trying to seek comfort, seek safety in the best way that you know how? I will help you establish how to do that in a healthy way, one that actually creates change within you. And that means that it will require a cost, time and investment for you to explore where does that come from, and then to replace it with things that actually create and build a healthy mind, a strong emotional capacity. And then in week 3, I'll address purpose and how it's not your job to establish and to maintain your destiny, to feel like you have to control every life outcome, and how that increases anxiety in your life. and how when you can learn a healthy level of surrender and trust with God, that this actually produces peace. And there's a difference between having goals and dreams and knowing what your calling is and how those two intersect, how it translates in a practical way. So after those first 3 weeks, then for maintenance and support, I offer two different tracks. The first one is a $20 subscription with Substack, and you can see everything with that subscription, all of my blogs, newsletters that will continue to help you walk in these new truths. You will also receive mindset insights that are very specific to what was covered in those first 3 weeks. And then the other option would be the mentorship subscription, which is $50 a month. This includes a once a month live Zoom meeting, which will be multi-generational, so you can learn from the other generations. But we will continue to go down this path of how do we continue to have the mind of Christ, to think like God thinks, to continue to stay strong, even in the midst of a very difficult and dark world. How can we be there for one another in community and continue to grow? Then you will also receive mindset refresh videos, which just means I will create a 5, 10, 15-minute video once or twice a month, and that will be shared directly with you. They're just kind of good refreshers. We all need that. As it says in Romans 12:2, that it's easy to fall back into conforming to the patterns of this world because it's all around us every day. But we must renew our minds. And we do that by reading the word and by interacting with other strong believers. This mentorship community creates that environment for that healthy reinforcement of what we know we should be thinking, feeling, and behaving. And then you will receive product discounts. So, different seminars that I might put on or new books that come out, you will receive an exclusive discount by being part of the mentorship community. So, what exactly am I offering? Well, it's a live 3 week Zoom workshop. Each session is about an hour and a half. There's interactive teaching and a time of Q&A, as well as resources or homework. My experience in counseling has taught me that there needs to be practical application to see transformation. As we discussed earlier in the video, this generation has plenty of information, but now it's about how do they strategically apply it to their life to see change. And then who is this for? Well, obviously, it's for Gen Zers, so ages 16 to late 20s. There's no cutoff, really. But I would say 16 is about as young as they could be, just because it's a lot of information. And so they'll be cognitively mature enough to digest it. And then it's also for parents, grandparents, mentors, youth pastors, any ministry leaders. Part of my mandate in establishing Kingdom Mindset was to equip multi-level generations to then pass it on to others. So it's not just something that I want you to learn, but I want it to be something that you could go and teach to other people. And so my final cry, my heart's compassion to Gen Z is this. You may have been born into a storm, and the storm, obviously, in our world today is not over, but you can learn to stand in it and not feel the pressure, the mental and emotional turmoil that you're feeling today. What does it sound like to you to find in just 3 weeks the new you? I would encourage you to sign up today. Space is limited. The price is $147 for all 3 weeks. That's less than $50 a week. If you've ever been to counseling or any type of coaching seminar, that is a steal. And then I would encourage, if you are a parent, a grandparent, that maybe you would consider purchasing this for someone that you love. Well, that's it for today. I look forward to those of you who take the chance, who are bold enough, who are tired of feeling the way you feel, that you would sign up and make this the best year, the most fruitful year of your life. And I look forward to seeing you in the workshop. Remember, your kingdom destiny awaits, and it all begins with a mindset.